This episode is presented to you by NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. With NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV, you can watch your favorite team's out-of-market Sunday games, plus watch up to 4 games at once with Multiview. Don't miss the race to the playoffs. NFL Sunday Ticket is now just $39 when bundled with YouTube TV, where you get even more football. Visit youtube.com/Spotify offer to sign up now. Lowest price on YouTube TV with base plan. Rest of 2023 season. Terms and embargoes apply. No cancellations.
Apple Gift Card is a practical gift that unlocks a world of entertainment and fun. You can send it via email or give a physical card to your loved ones. Your friends and family can spend it on their favorite Apple services, including Apple subscriptions. Apple Gift Card can be used to buy all things Apple: products, accessories, apps, games, movies, TV shows, iCloud Plus, and more. Visit apple.com for details and to send Apple Gift Cards to your friends and family this holiday season.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
We're back, just like I said we'd be back for the Glory KC episode 3. Welcome, everybody. We have a guest host today. Well, I have my wife, Sheena. Hey, Sheena.
Hi. Hey.
Just like last time, a little awkward with your highs and your hays. And we have a third host with us. With us this week, Eric Reuter, also better known as Farmhand from thebluetestament.com. Eric, what's up, man?
Howdy.
All right, so we'll get to know everybody a little better here in just a second, but I want to kind of get this like gross part of podcasting out of the way at the front end of things here. Little plugs for the Glory KC. You can find us on all your social media platforms at For the Glory KC on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you can even email us at forthegloryKC@gmail.com. We'd love to hear emails from you all and maybe reply to them and have conversations about it. Could be good times. Also, got to say this, 5-star rating and reviews. It helps us. It helps the whole Blue Testament podcast network. For the Glory KC is just one of many podcasts on the Blue Testament network. If you don't want to write a 5-star review, just tweet it at me at Play490. Don't put it in our feed right now. Give us time to get better. We'll get this thing figured out. But before we get into all this week's many, many topics, and we learned a little bit more about our third guest host here, Sheena, you have some sort of clarification you need to give?
Yes.
And she wouldn't tell me what it was. She's like, I'll tell you on the podcast.
Yeah, because I'm probably going to embarrass you right now, but I feel like this needs to be said. So first off, if you listened to the whole podcast the last week, thank you. I know it was a little rough. I've never been on a podcast before. And as you heard, I'm not as knowledgeable as Chad, but I'm working on it. But I did want to clarify a statement that Chad made last week. It was something to the effect of Sheena gets forced into my hobbies because I go in 1,000%. Do you know where I'm going to be going with this, Chad?
I don't know for sure, but I mean, this is true. Are you going to mention how you sometimes watch wrestling with me because I watch wrestling?
Yeah, that's going to get mentioned. But I want the record to be shown. I don't get into all of Chad's hobbies because Chad has too many hobbies. That's true. If I got into everything he was interested in, I'd have no identity outside of him. So for the most part, soccer is the only one I've gotten into. But I just wanted to give the listeners an idea of what other hobbies you have, just because you have so many of them. And I don't know how you juggle them all.
Well, let's remember, this is a Kansas City soccer audience about the hobbies that you're about to mention.
I know. Don't worry. I'm going to protect you. So Chad was really into soccer. This includes Sporting Kansas City, KC Current, Sporting KC too. Although you didn't watch as much of them last season because of the broadcast setup. And then during the MLS season, you watch all however many games there are every week, like the condensed versions of every game, including Sporting Kansas City. Even though you were either at the game or you just watched the game, you rewatched the condensed version. And then you follow the men's and women's national team. And during the World Cup, you've been watching a lot of the recap games, and not as closely now that the United States has been eliminated, but you were watching all the recaps. So if soccer was his only hobby, I'd be like, okay, you're really into it. But then he has so many other interests, football, but I won't tell you who he roots for. UFC, I don't follow it, but I will go to the matches. Is that what they're called? The events?
The fight cards? I don't know.
The fight cards, yeah. And then Chad mentioned he's gotten me a little bit into AEW wrestling, and admittedly, I know way too much about it. And it's ridiculous how sucked in I can get into it at least once a week because it's on a few times. Star Wars, he's really into that. All the movies, the spin-off shows, collecting the Funko Pops. I'm going to have to take a picture and post it somewhere so people can see how addicted to the Funko Pops you are.
Oh my gosh, Sheena, this is a 45-minute podcast.
I'm almost done. Video games, computer games, Game of Thrones. If I said I wanted to watch Game of Thrones right now, this podcast would cease to exist because he would want to start watching it right away. And then Mizzou football. So you have a lot of hobbies and interests, and I don't take part in most of them, like one, maybe two.
Wow, that was really long. Okay, well, Eric, I'm glad you got to sit through that. Let's learn a little bit about Eric. So, Eric, I want you to tell us what brought you to, Kansas City soccer fandom. Give us a little Eric story since it's been all the Chad and Sheena show so far.
Well, the quick version, if there is one, is that I grew up a fan of the old Rochester Rhinos of the A-League, a small market Rust Belt team that exploded onto the scene, winning multiple championships and actually rivaling MLS clubs. They were the most successful minor league team probably in American history, especially with major leagues on there. They won the only team to win the Open Cup in the MLS era that wasn't MLS, beating 4 MLS teams in a row to do it. So that really, the sort of civic pride that developed with a team that was drawing 14,000 people a game in a minor league city, outdrawing about half of MLS at the time in the early era, and really getting a lot of talk about being an MLS team, kind of the way Green Bay was in sense of a small town city, never really happened. But that drew me in as a source of civic pride and interest in what a team could be. Moved to Missouri a long time ago. I live in rural central Missouri now, but I lost touch with MLS for a long time. I think partly because MLS spurned my team as an expansion team, and the Rhinos kind of collapsed under the burden of not getting they flew too close to the sun and then kind of collapsed beneath that. And that's a longer story. But it took me a while to reconnect with the sport. And I think it was partly the Sporting rebranding that helped do it, because when I moved out here, they were the Wiz or the Wizards, and they wore rainbows. They played in an empty football stadium, and it just wasn't something that was all that appealing to an outsider at the time. And when they, as MLS has done, started to rebuild teams and leagues as something less skateboardy and something more attractive, frankly, it kind of slowly drew me back in. And even as streaming became more possible, it became more able to watch games, as it became more accessible to watch things from further away. I'm 3 hours away. I'm not going to go to live games routinely. I need access to an ability to watch things easily. So it gradually grew up as a return to a sport that I grew up with, but had let go for a while in favor of other things and other life stories. Chino, I think, was wondering about the username last week. Farmhand actually goes way back to the days my wife and I were running an organic farm, diverse organic farm. And I actually joined Royals Review as a baseball fan, and farmhand was a pretty good pun on the standard term for minor league player, and the fact that I was running a full-time farm at the time. So that name stuck, and that name's over a decade old. And so when I ported it on to starting to follow Sporting more, it just followed along. It doesn't make any sense in a soccer context, but it's a baseball name that followed me over as I grew deeper and deeper into the Kansas City sports scene. So that's the rambly short version, but it comes from a long tradition of seeing what soccer can do for a community that takes pride in punching above its weight. Both Rochester and I think Kansas City are communities like that. really adopt a team and an identity people can support and feel that that's something that gives them something they can rally around. And hopefully Sporting has a better future than the Rhinos did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really like hearing that story. And you mentioning your username just brought me back to Eric asked me between pods, was your wife upset about something I did or something I said? I was like, no, I think she was just thrown off by the name Farmhand. Like, she's like, what is this? Like, you comment onto the name Farmhand. I was like, there's a reason. You guys actually would probably be great friends because Sheena's into organic everything. So, but this is
wait. I also thought you said farmland, and so that made even less sense to me. Like, farmhand obviously sounds like you do something with farming, but farmland, I just was thrown off.
Okay, well, I use the moniker Legend of Chad on a lot of message boards and things.
So ridiculous.
Sheena's embarrassed every time she has to give it out to her friends or family on Venmo. But yeah, if you all want to Venmo me money, Legend of Chad. All right, so let's get into the actual soccer talk. We got lots of different voices this week. So we're going to start off with Sporting Kansas City. Big news for the team. They announced new contracts for Graham Zusi, Roger Espinoza, and Andreu Fontes. Zusi and Espinoza signed 1-year deals with a team-held option for another year, and Fontes is on a 2-year guaranteed deals. I want to read this quote from Peter Vermees. Actually, I'm sorry. This is actually a quote from the Kansas City Star, kind of re-quoting Peter Vermees, but it didn't have quotes around it, so I'm not sure exactly if it's word for word. But it said that these new contracts, they are, quote, not financially preventative contracts, the ones given to Espinoza, Zusi, and Fontes, to what else Sporting Kansas City would like to accomplish this offseason. And it also goes on to say that the Fontes deal is also less expensive than his previous rate because he was over 1.1 million previously. So sounds like a little bit lower dollar amounts here. So this has been talked about a lot already in the last week. I don't want to, beat to death some topics that we've already covered over at thebluetestament.com. You should all go check it out. But just really brief thoughts. I'll throw to you first, Sheena. What are you feeling about these return signings?
Yeah, so exactly what I said last week should happen, did happen. I'm not saying I can predict the future, but clearly somebody at Sporting Kansas City is listening to this podcast. I'm totally kidding.
That's definitely happening. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Honestly, with Espinoza and Zusi, the 1-year contract makes sense. And I'm okay with Fontes being under a 2-year contract. I just hope they find somebody to go alongside him who's strong and who can help him out. So we're not making as many mistakes and giving up as many goals as we did last season.
What about you, Eric? What are you thinking?
I think the deals aren't a problem. The question is how the players are used on those deals. So I don't think anyone has a problem with bringing these guys back on the roster. If he's running them out for 80 minutes a game again, every game, then we have a problem. So it's a wait and see question because I have no problem bringing them back. It's something that most fans are probably going to be happy with in a general sort of way. As long as you don't run these guys on the ground and run the team into the ground doing it, nobody's going to have a problem with them being there.
Yeah, I kind of am in the same boat as you. It's all coming down to how many minutes do these guys play. I think Fontes, it's very plausible that he could be an everyday starter because the center back pairing tends to stay out there all the time. Back to Sheena's point, who are they pairing him with? Which they did say that they're still looking for a right center back, probably meaning Nicholas Isimat-Marin is gone. But then in terms of the other two, Zusi and Espinoza, if they're starting every game, if they're getting ground into dust and they're in the way of younger future talents that are going to be leading this team hopefully for years to come, then that becomes more of a problem. And then it's the money. How much money are these guys on? Just because Fontes took less, is it significantly less? Is it still, in the upper hundreds of thousands of dollars, like pushing $1 million? All that will weigh in. But hey, if they're great and fantastic next year, we'll probably forget about all this stuff. Now, Eric, I think you had kind of a question to move away from the signings themselves, just in a more general sense about this whole, I don't know, the perception versus reality of these roster moves. Tell me what you were thinking.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this from a team's point of view, in a perfect world, they would moneyball the heck out of this and just do whatever is perfectly right for the team. And they would just, if you got an aging veteran, he's gone, don't like this guy, he's gone. But you're also a business operating in a crowded marketplace and you need people to like you. You need fans to want you. You have a lot of stuff going on. So there's a question of how much teams should be taking into account fan opinion, right or wrong, versus taking into account what's purely objectively best for the team. So this is where I think some of these signings come into play. At least I'm not in PV's head, but it's sometimes you have to do something that will keep fans on board. Sometimes you do something that shows that you're loyal, that you're the kind of team people want to support, because people stick with the team, not just wins or losses, because they feel inspired by it. They want to identify it. They don't want to be the team that kicks people to the roadside like a tin can. And we've already had a few instances, people getting a little fussy about that with, say, Opara, Beasler, Elie. There's been some angst about that. So, if you told Zusi and Espinoza to take a walk, even if it was the right move for the team, I'm not sure that's a good PR move. So realistically, I think teams are balancing the need to show people that they're a team you want to support, as well as show people that we're moving forward from this. So in that sense, these also make sense to me, but I think we need to keep that in mind with these moves.
Yeah, I think the business sense of it, like Zusi probably sells a lot of jerseys, if I had to guess. I know that Russell's the number one seller in recent seasons, but Graham Zusi is a fan favorite. I guarantee you he's bringing casual fans to the table. They know that name. Sheena told that story last week about basically that was her connection to coming to watching Sporting Kansas City. She knew Zusi from the national team. So yeah, it's definitely something to that. And having him be a one club man, I don't know, I said that weird. I think that says something. That means something, right? If you stay with one team the whole way for your entire MLS career, your entire professional career for that matter, that has some weight. Sheena, what do you think? What are your reactions to Eric's thoughts?
Yeah, so I think to a degree, you do need to take into consideration what the fans think, because they're the ones buying the tickets to the game, supporting the teams, and buying the merchandise, etc. Should an executive decision be based on what the fans think? I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. However, I go to a point that Eric just made, fan favorites who are no longer on the team when they, didn't get their contracts renewed. I think specifically just because it's more recent, Ilie, and how upset fans were when Ilie was no longer with Sporting. And I remember seeing comments that people were no longer going to support Sporting or be season ticket holders. And to me, that seems a little excessive, but ultimately Peter Vermes should be the expert and know what's best for the team. And if you trust your coach, you put faith that he's putting forth the best roster at the beginning of the season. It may not make sense to the casual fan, but, ideally, if you do trust your coach, they're doing what's best for the team. And I think knowing the fan favorites is important to like Peter Vermes. But if you're going to replace someone, I think, especially if they are a fan favorite, you better have someone impressive taking over that spot. And I think last year, I don't know that we were really into Ilie's replacement, because I think it ended up, I don't know who it was.
It was kind of a combination of a lot of people, right? Remy Valter ended up kind of taking that role by the end of the year.
Yeah,
but before that, it was supposed to be Jose Maury. Remember his 27 minutes of MLS play? You don't remember? She didn't shake her head. It was unmemorable. It was really bad, and he got cut after one game. And then,
did you remember that?
Oh, see, there you go.
Yeah.
And then Uri Rosell was, I think, maybe supposed to be the other guy, and he didn't work out so well, I would say.
Yeah. So if you're going to replace the fan favorites, you need to have somebody like a superstar coming in. It needs to make sense, I guess, for the casual fan to get behind it.
A comparison you can make here in the Kansas City context is the Royals, who have come in for a lot of criticism for being overly loyal, for not being transparent. Just, they stick with people way too long. Like, yeah, they want to build the community. They want to raise good people. They want the ball players good people. But when you get like 5 or 6 losing seasons in a row doing that, you've gone too far in one direction. So far, I think Sporting balanced that pretty well, but it's the kind of thing you have to think about. On the other hand, if you're completely transactional and just cold-blooded, you're also going to start annoying people. So you're treading a fine line in the perception versus reality. Even if the reality is, exactly what you're doing and you're going hardcore Moneyball, perception, whether it's sports, politics, business, perception is something you've got to consider. And I think that's the tightrope line you're walking when you make decisions like this.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because if you were like, think of the Beasler situation, right? They cut him and it is a little cold, but he's also had a bit of a drop off that last year before he left and was making significant money, versus I would say Zusi and Espinoza played really well when they were on the field. Zusi was hurt a little bit more this season than he has been in prior years, but it's hard to argue that it wasn't some of his best minutes when he was out there just pinging balls all over the place. And, he's always good for a good Golazo or two every season. So he had that banger against Vancouver. I also want to kind of think about other sports too, because you think of like the Patriots, the New England Patriots. I always go to them because they always say Belichick is so cold-hearted. Sheena got an angry look on her face just hearing Belichick's name. But like, he'll move on when he has to move on. Maybe moved on a little too early from old Tommy B, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good balance. Zusi's still performing as long as I think we're all in agreement. He just doesn't need to play too much and stand in the way of your Caden Pierres of the world, because he's the future. He's young. He's hopefully going to be a national team talent one day, just like Zusi before him. Any other thoughts on these moves before we go in a different direction? I got some head shakes. All right. Always good for a audio medium, guys.
I'm good.
So I have a question kind of that I want to debate it to our last little topic really about Sporting Kansas City. Our last main topic here, I would say, is with these re-signings, we have now brought back, like I'm a part of the team, Sporting Kansas City has brought back all but 2 players. The only 2 that are not coming back as of right now are Nicholas Isimat-Marin and Kaveh Rod. This team missed the playoffs in 2022, and now they're running it back with the, quote, new signings of Alan Pulido and Gadi Kinda, who will return from injury, hopefully. And then the only other new signing as of right now is Nemanja Radoja, who's coming over from La Liga to play defensive midfielder to replace Ilie, because I'm still got people in my DMs messaging me about Ilie. So do either of you have concerns? Do you feel good about it? Where are we landing on this with almost bringing back the whole team?
So I'll start. I'm a little worried we don't have enough talent on defense. Right now we have Fontes and then another person who's yet to be named. So I guess depending on who that is, that maybe I'll feel a little bit better. But then who are the backups to the starters? I don't know.
Courtney Ford and Robert Voladere are going to be your backups at center back. She's got this look on her face like she's never heard of these people.
No,
that's why you're bringing the casual perspective, right, Sheena?
That was a look of like, oh, I'm not as excited about them, but that's fine. I do think we have strong forwards and strikers. I also feel like we don't hear as much anymore about the academy players. I don't know if that was part of what you were going over. I kind of tuned out.
Let's hope our listeners aren't tuning out like you are. Wow.
I know. Oh, gosh. But yeah, I feel like for a while there, we were hearing about academy players and we don't really hear about that anymore. And then my other question is, does Pulido and Agada need another backup? And what happened to Marinos? Also, when I was thinking about this, I couldn't remember his name. And Chad, you'll appreciate this. The way I had to Google his name was the Cyprus soccer player who plays on Sporting Kansas City. It's really random. That's how I know him.
What do you think, Eric?
This is going to be a different season than we've seen before, partly because of the Leagues Cup added in. So we're adding more games. At least the league isn't compressed because of the World Cup, but we are seeing a different setup, and it's going to require some depth and roster flexibility in how we put those people together. So on one hand, I'm fine with saying we started to see a completely different team in the last third of the season. Someone on the Blue Testament had a line that I'm just going to copy because it was great about the longest preseason ever. That last third of the season was just a long audition for how we want to do things going forward. And looking at it that way, yeah, let's move forward with this. The team was never likely to make giant splashes in, a new DP signing or something. We have Kinda, we have Pulido. That's what they've hitched their wagon to. He's saying we're going to get one more center back. That's fine. That's the biggest hole we have. Like it or not, this is what we're moving forward with because there isn't a realistic, splashy revamp of the team coming, I don't think. Even if you choose the 5 players you wanted to cut because you don't like them, it's not clear who the replacements would be that we'd be bringing in on a comparable salary and a comparable acquisition. Maybe you take a bunch of flyers on players you've never heard of. And Sporting hits on some and doesn't hit on some. So realistically, the way Vermees runs the team, this is what we were always going to have. So I'm not going to get real worked up about whether we could have blown it up and started over. So It's more a question of whether we can balance these players and use them in a way that we don't burn out the way they've done the last 3 or 4 seasons, burn out about July or August because we haven't rotated players and we've run everyone in the ground and injuries are cropping up. That's my bigger concern than whether this is the roster. It's whether this roster will be allowed to stay healthy through October.
Yeah, I'm the eternal optimist. I get a lot of grief for it sometimes because I'm always like, I feel like it's going to work out. It's just like, even last year when things were off the rails, I was like, I don't know. I feel like Sporting could turn it around. And then they just really didn't. Well, until those signings came in. So I think there is a case to be made. And I think I wrote this in a story that the first 2/3-ish of the year where Sporting were a nightmare, it was pretty grim, right? And you tell me you're bringing that team back, that doesn't sound great. But then when you talk about the team post Willie Agada, post Eric Tommy showing up, that I think they had the second best record in the league down the stretch, or at least they did with like a game or two to go. So that's pretty impressive. If they'd have made it into the playoffs, who would have wanted to play that team? And you're telling me you're going to add Alan Pulido, you're going to add Gadi Kinda back to that. Hopefully they'll be ready to go. Plus, you're going to add another center back to hopefully fix the back line a little bit. I'm an optimist. I feel like it's going to work itself out. You never know. If they get injured and banged up again, it could all collapse and fall apart, and Vermes could finally be gone. He's going into a contract year. So there is a little bit of wiggle room left. The team has signed 26 of 30 players. Technically, they can sign another designated player. I already kind of gave my thoughts on that I don't think that is going to happen. But there's no open international slots. They could trade for one. They could get a green card. They could open one up. There's no open U22 slots. For those of you who are not familiar with the U22 initiative, basically spend unlimited money on a player that's under the age of 22, and then you can pay them up to the MLS max budget charge, which is something like $651,000 next year. So right now, Marino Sjanis, the Cyprus guy, Sheena, Robert Volader, who you groaned about, and Logan and Dembe are taking up those spots. Technically, you could buy one of those down with TAM and get another guy with a big old exorbitant transfer fee. But I think we're probably mostly where we're going to be. I think it looks like a center back and some depth pieces, maybe a draft pick coming up in the MLS Super Draft. So y'all feel ready to move on from Sporting Kansas City? Okay, nods again. So before we talk other subjects, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment with For the Glory KC.
This episode is brought to you by Google Pixel, the official fan phone of the NBA and WNBA. The new Pixel 8 and Pixel 8 Pro are built different. How? Take the Audio Magic Eraser tool. It helps block out distracting crowd noise so your play-by-play commentary sounds crystal clear. The only phone engineered by Google brings out the audio you care about so your videos sound as crisp as they look. Learn more at googlestore.com/pixelnba. Audio Magic Eraser requires Google Photos app. May not work on all audio elements.
The holidays are a time to feel and create joy. And what could be more joyous than the look on her face as she unwraps a stunning new jewelry piece from Blue Nile? How about getting 50% off your purchase? Blue Nile offers premium quality, priced below traditional retail. Their online experts are available 24/7 to answer any questions and make sure you've picked the perfect gift. For a limited time, you can get 50% off at BlueNile.com. That's 50% off at BlueNile.com.
And we are back. Welcome back to For the Glory KC. All right, one more topic about Sporting Kansas City. Sort of. We're gonna mix our footballs here a little bit, and we're gonna talk a little Kansas City Chiefs, even though I was hating in this first segment about the Chiefs. So little news about the Chiefs came out this week from a story in the New York Times. Sporting Kansas City co-owner Rob Heineman is involved in a deal, a little behind the scenes shenanigans, politicking, whatever you want to call it, going on to possibly move the Chiefs from Missouri to Kansas. So Heineman and lawmakers told the New York Times that he and other home field executives, he owns home field, pushed state officials to include the stadium fund in the bill. So the state collects a 10% tax on betting revenue, and the bill, which took effect back on September 1st, steers 80% of that money into attracting professional sports to Kansas Fund. So about $5 million basically a year is going to go into this bucket to try to bring the Chiefs over. It's going to take a lot more than $5 million. I'm pretty sure these stadiums are like $1 to $2 billion at this point, but I don't have strong feelings about it. I don't care where the Chiefs play. It would be near Sporting Park. Do you all have strong feelings about it? Sheena?
I don't know that I have strong feelings, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Chiefs will get a new stadium in Kansas City. And while I don't think people will agree with a tax to finance it, I think if it was on a ballot, it'd get approved and we'd end up paying for it anyways. There's too much Chiefs pride in Kansas City, Missouri, and I think it hurt the fan base if they moved to Kansas. I think
so you're saying the Kansas City, Kansas fans don't have pride in the Chiefs? That's good clarification. I'm glad to hear that.
No, I'm sure they do. I don't know. I know they do, but
we're Missourians. We're biased over here. We're on this side of the river.
Exactly. I think the state of Kansas, though, is hoping to lure the Chiefs with that sports betting that you were talking about. And Rob Heineman did play a role with that. The one thing I found interesting is a lot of the local TV I watch has been covering the sports betting. In fact, this morning I heard kind of an update on it, so I'll share that in a minute. But in October, Governor Kelly announced that the state generated $1.3 million in revenue the first month, and 130 of that 130,000, I should say, went to the state. On PBS, there's a show I watch every week called Kansas City Week in Review. And back in October, they touched on this topic after that first round of revenue came in from the state. And they were saying overall the numbers were low. If that amount continued, where it was about 1.3 million a month, that would mean the state would only get about 1.5 million a year, and they were estimating it at 5 million, like you just said. So far, it's not kind of panning out, at least that first month. However, it's important to note that the online betting websites, Fanbase, I think, is one of them or something like that. There's a couple online websites that reported a loss that first month, and that was just because they gave credits to new users. So the money totals could actually be higher going forward. And then I just feel like personally, any money the state gets should go to something other than stadiums, like maybe education, maybe roads. There's so many other issues over a stadium. And like I was saying this morning, I was listening to KMBC Morning News, and they mentioned that there's a bill already pre-filled to legalize sports betting in Missouri. So I think they are trying to get sports betting here in Missouri. I don't know what that time frame is because they didn't say it. But I'm sure that would help the Chiefs stay in Missouri if something like that did get passed. Overall, I don't really care since the cost to attend a Chiefs game is ridiculous. So if Sporting wanted to come over to Missouri and the Chiefs go to Kansas, I don't care. But yeah, I just wanted to share that stuff on the online betting.
Eric, where are you at on all this?
So 2 thoughts. In previous years, the Chiefs moving out to the Speedway area could affect Sporting because MLS used to like to put premier marquee matchups on Sundays, and now you're not just going head-to-head attendance-wise, but parking, traffic, and so on. With the new Apple deal, that's no longer an issue because games are guaranteed Wednesdays and Saturdays. So from that point of view, a big deal won't really affect them. On the other hand, there's a lot of moving pieces right now with stadiums in the Kansas City area. The current just kind of put first dibs on the new urban accessible type of stadium that no one else has in the city right now. Royals are talking about doing it. By the time the current and the Royals have put stadiums in that sort of accessible urban core, I don't think Sporting are going anywhere. Their stadium's only 10 years old. So as an environmentalist, I hope they don't blow it up and start over in another year. But I also wonder where Children's Mercy is not really where MLS is going in terms of the fan base it's trying to cultivate. If you look at the success of all of our expansion teams, the teams with the most vibrant support are all teams. They have transit access. They're either in downtown or urban centers. This is actually a drum I've been beating on Royals Review for a while. We need to stop saying downtown stadium. We need to be saying urban stadium, because the point is whether or not it's integrated into a neighborhood and accessible. It doesn't matter if it's downtown. It matters that it's integrated into the urban center. And so we're about to have, before Sporting ever gets there, we're going to have 2 other of those probably in town. So Sporting's probably stuck out of the Speedway. Long term, that's not really where the MLS fan base is going, or at least what MLS is marketing to. So I'm not sure down the road if Sporting start feeling the pinch of more options that are more accessible for summertime sports entertainment, and if that starts to hurt them. We won't know, but that's the thing that concerns me. It's not directly Chiefs related, but putting football out at the Speedway makes sense because you play on Sunday afternoons mostly. You can get 70,000 people in and out of there, no problem. But things like soccer and baseball, the leagues are showing that these work really well when you put them in places people can get to in a regular basis easily. And Sporting is kind of behind the curve now on that. And by the time it's time to replace that, they're going to be really behind the curve. So I don't know what that means going forward, but I do think it shows an interesting, everyone else is thinking about a better way to put their team, and Sporting's kind of stuck in this odd, out of sync. Like their sine wave is offset from everyone else's wavelength on where stadiums should be right now. So that's just a long-term question I have. It's not something we can discuss much more because they're not going anywhere for now.
Yeah, hopefully we got a long time left of using Children's Mercy Park, right? It's not that old of a facility, but it always blows me away that they move on so fast. Yeah,
but I'll just throw this in for comparison. This is another slight pressure on them. When you look at what St. Louis is doing, putting their stadium right in the urban core, right in the light rail line, getting to that really easily, that's a bit of pressure on Sporting. People aren't going back and forth Kansas City, St. Louis routinely, but you're still creating a nearby rival that has the type of setup that now more and more soccer fans expect and want based on what all the other newer teams are doing. So that's another interesting cross-state pressure on stadium atmosphere, stadium accessibility, shiny new toy effect. Does that create a little bit of pressure on Sporting to continue find other ways to be relevant, interesting in the broader spectrum?
Yeah, I think long-term, if someday there'll be another stadium, right? And when that does happen, I could see it being in the urban core, and the Kansas City Current and La Royals, like you mentioned, will be really good kind of barometers for how well that's working, because the Current, that stadium's going to be so close to us. Sheena and I, we drive by that all the time, and we're very excited about it. And 2024 can't get here soon enough. Have to get down there and watch the Kansas City Current. That's actually
the views that are going to be there. And I think just to hit a little bit on it, we've been to some road games, and I think about the stadiums that we've gone to, and specifically Seattle Sounders. Like, it's right there in the heart of the city, the views from the stadium. And I know that's the Seahawks stadium, but still, like, it's a central location. You could get there by public transit if you wanted. And that's just not a possibility with Sporting.
I hate the Sounders, and I'm upset that you brought them up and that they play on turf in a place where it rains all the time. I don't understand why they can't grow grass. I digress. Let's talk another Kansas City soccer team. Let's talk the Kansas City Current. We're talking about their stadium a little bit, but they're in the news for other reasons. They made signings. We're recording this on Wednesday. You should probably be hearing this on Thursday or later. Depends when you get to it. We're glad you're listening. They made 2 signings today, signing Morgan Gautreau and Vanessa Di Bernardo. I messed it up after I said it. I practiced Bernardo. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Vanessa. I'll get better. Both formerly of the Chicago Red Stars. They were free agents. They came over, both signed 2-year deals. A little background. Gautreau, first-round pick in 2015. I'm sorry, not just a first-round pick, the first overall pick in 2015 from the Houston Dash. She was the 2-time Mac Hermann Trophy winner, which is for the best female and male college athletes, college soccer athletes there, college players. And also she was on the 2015 and 2019 U.S. women's national team, winning the World Cup, and was an Olympian for the U.S. as well. Di Bernardo, hey, I did it, was the 4th overall pick in 2014 by the Red Stars. She is the Red Stars all-time leader in minutes, games, and assists. Pretty good for a 30-year-old here. And she's 8th all-time in the National Women's Soccer League in assists. So pretty big gets. I saw a lot of people saying, wow, I would have been blown away to get one of them. To get both of them is just kind of remarkable. That's where I'm coming down right now, too. It's that I don't know what this means, and we'll talk about it in a second in terms of how does this remake the midfield, but it shows ambition for me. Sheena, I think you're on the same page as me. What are you feeling about it as a big-time Chicago Red Stars watcher, right? You catch every game?
I don't know that I've caught a single game. And overall, as you were going through those quick stats, it's very impressive, the careers they both have had so far. So that gets me excited to see what they're going to do next season for KC Current.
Eric, what about you?
So I'm going to be a slight, I don't know if it's devil's advocate or a contrary here. And
gotta be difficult. All right, Eric.
This is obviously fantastic for the Current. No argument. This is this is fantastic. We just upped the game. And the Current, in many ways, are becoming a model franchise for how any team, much less a women's team, should be run. What this worries me a little bit is what this means for the league overall.
Okay, tell me more. I need to know more.
Yeah, we're rapidly creating a divergence between some really, really high-end things. The California expansion teams, the West Coast teams, Kansas City are just putting in money. They're just doing everything right. And then you've got a whole tier of teams at the other end that are struggling, that are getting bad attendance. They've been implicated in the Yates report. I mean, Chicago is a classic example of this. North Carolina is this. Chicago had games they drew under 2,000 people. They're playing in an awful stadium that even the Fire don't want. And when you're getting hand downs from the Fire, you're in a bad place. Sorry. So, their owner is being forced to sell because he's implicated in some of the abuse in the Yates report. As much as I'm inspired by the current new stadium and seeing things like San Diego and LA and these teams just taking off and doing everything right, you need a stable nationwide league for these teams like Kansas City and these other teams to succeed. And if the bottom is falling out at the same time that you're blowing the roof off, that's a long-term problem. And when I see Chicago, if we're poaching two of their best, most recognizable fan favorite players, and those players scrammed the moment free agency opened, what does that mean for that franchise? What does that mean for the league? Why would you be a Red Stars fan? Why would you support this team that has just had the plug pulled from it? I'm a little worried what that means in the long run if we can't stabilize these other teams that all of a sudden we're poaching from. So I'm not criticizing the move. I think it's fantastic from a current fan. I'm just a little worried that we're seeing more of the repercussions, shockwaves from things like the Yates report, and that we need to be aware of the broader context of why players like this are moving on from one team to another. And that concerns me.
I think I might be wrong on this. Chad, Eric, you guys probably know better than me. I thought I read today that Chicago and Portland are going up for sale.
You may have read that on the BlueTestament.com.
Oh, I may have actually.
Maybe written by your husband.
Oh, yeah. I think I did read it from you. Sorry.
Yes, that is correct. They're both going up for sale. So to Eric's point there, I think that's fair, right? That's a fair critique of some of these other teams. I think back to the beginning of the 2022 season, I think there are 10 teams in the NWSL last season, if I'm remembering right off the top of my head. And every single one of them had a new coach. Like, how weird is that, right? To come off a year where even the team that the defending champions had new coaches, because there's so much chaos going on in terms of all this like scandal, like you said on the Yates report. Oh, it's an awful read. If you want to go read it, it'll depress you. But I think ownership groups like those California teams that you mentioned, especially like the Longs and Brittany Mahomes here owning the Kansas City Current, they're doing everything right. And hopefully these sales that are happening, Merritt Paulson up in Portland and the owner there in Chicago, I'm drawing a blank on his name, even though I wrote it literally today, they are going to go to better owners. Hopefully I'm optimistic that they're going to find the right people. They're going to attract the right ownership groups, people that want to be in it for the right reasons. So maybe it'll be like a blessing in disguise, kind of like a lot of this coach turnover. We ended up with some really good coaches coming into the league and get rid of some of these rehash coaches just going from team to team, continuing their misconduct and bad behavior all over the league. So I'm optimistic, but I want to turn the conversation a little bit back to the Kansas City Current, back to the roster, and what does this mean for them? So the first thing I saw tweeted after this came out was from Meg Linehan of The Athletic, fantastic writer. You should go read Meg's stuff. She actually helped break some of that scandal that came out last year. And she was saying, hey, doesn't Sam Mewis play the same position as Morgan Cottrell? What does that mean for Sam? I know that Sam was kind of like halfway in and out of training at times last year for the Current. She never made it onto the field in the regular season. She played like a half during the Challenge Cup, and then that was it. I know some people are speculating out there, maybe she never plays again. Maybe she's just not going to be right, or she's nowhere near being ready to go. So that's a concern. Do y'all have thoughts about Sam Mewis and her future?
Don't know that we have enough information, really. I mean, I don't like speculating about health like that. I know it's the core of sports talk, but if we have more information, I'm not sure there's much we can say.
Yeah, I think if nothing, at least it's the team protecting themselves against Mewis potentially not being around, right? And then at the same time, they also lost, I almost said the wrong one. I'm drawing a blank. What is our French midfielder's name right now? Help me out, guys.
What, you mean Claire Lavallée?
Claire Lavallée. Yes, there we go. Lavallée. So she's out all year, most likely because of her catastrophic knee injury. So it provides some insurance in the midfield. I'm for that. Now, one other thing that it kind of got me thinking about was Desiree Scott. She's also a free agent. She was in talks with the team. My colleague, my boss, Thad Bell, the managing editor over at the Blue Testament, site manager, I think is his official title. He said that the Current are still in talks with Scott, but I was wondering, does this mean she doesn't come back? Because I thought Gautreau actually played a little deeper in the midfield and played where Scott played. And we already have Alex Loera that can play that spot. So I love Desi Scott. She's a great leader out there. We get to talk to her in the post-game press conferences, and she is just like, she puts me to shame. She can put her words together so much better than I can. And she's a great leader. But I always feel like she's good for at least one disastrous pass or two every game, and that kind of stresses me out. I'm not saying Gautreau is perfect, but talented, younger, father time undefeated, as they say. What do y'all think? Is this a bad sign for Desi being back in the midfield next year?
Well, one thing, and this actually can tie into something I think we're going to talk about later, but maybe it comes in now. The NWSL schedule is changing this year, and depth is going to be more important given that they're restructuring their schedule. So you could argue that some of these are depth. It's not a same roster. We may need to be seeing these players rotating in and out to balance this. I don't know if you want to hold off on that, but that's, I think, going to be relevant to the schedule discussion when you want to get to that.
Yeah, go for it, Eric. Tell me about this. What's going on with
the schedule? So basically the NWSL just released their, what they call their schedule footprint, which is they haven't scheduled every game yet, but they're telling you how the season's going to run. So the last season they've done the Challenge Cup. They did that. They started that during the pandemic as kind of a one-off tournament to be able to play something. Then they shifted to that being kind of a season opening tournament where they played a little mini World Cup style tournament with group stages and then the knockout. And that was meant to start the season. And then the season began after that and ran on. So you kind of won the Challenge Cup and then you move on. And there was some controversy there because the Challenge Cup ended up overlapping with the seasons. You had teams, in this Challenge Cup championship, when they'd already started the season, it was schedule congestion. It was all a little confusing for people, like, why are these two things going on? So this year, they are shifting the Challenge Cup to not be an opening season tournament, but to run parallel with the entire season, kind of the way the U.S. Open Cup runs with MLS. So now they'll be starting within a week or two of each other. I think NWSL starts in late March, Challenge Cup starts sometime in April, but they will be playing parallel these group stage games spread out throughout the season, and then the knockout games happening in September shortly before the regular season ends. So now you're looking at juggling two different competitions throughout the season rather than playing one competition and then another. So it's a little more schedule congestion. And you could look at some of these signings as depth for juggling that. And we all know that schedule congestion messes with MLS teams. Every year we see it, who Open Cup runs, Champions League runs, just guts the teams that does them. So you can look at these signings as addressing that change in schedule.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good take. And on the Challenge Cup in general, I'm happy that it's coming along with the season. It was so weird last season because the Current did really well. They were like playing lights out in this. Then all of a sudden they got to play a regular season game midweek, and then they're back in the Challenge Cup game, and they didn't have premier lineups for either game, but the Challenge Cup's a preseason tournament, so it doesn't matter, but there's a bunch of prize money, so it does matter. It was a weird situation. I think this is a creative solution, but it leaves me wondering, why isn't there a U.S. Open Cup for women's soccer? There's all these other leagues, the WPSL, that could put teams into it. I would love to see some like lower division women's teams playing against NWSL teams. I mean, maybe we call it like a North American Cup here in a few years. There's already the Mexican League, Liga Femenil. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Sorry, Hispanic listeners or Spanish-speaking listeners. And then there's now talks of a Canadian professional women's league starting in 2025 with 8 teams. So I think like a North American Cup, that'd be pretty sweet to see the different leagues play against each other. Maybe you build up these lower division teams have to climb and, don't join in the first round sort of thing. Just like MLS comes in rounds 3, 4 things, same thing in overseas. This is how soccer's played around the world. Americans aren't really used to it, I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, that 2 competitions, 3 competitions, they lay over the top of each other. But I think that's how it is. And I'm okay with it. Sheena, do you have feelings about this?
I'm with you. Last season was very confusing with the cup at the beginning of the season, but then like the preseason, it was very confusing to keep up with it. So I like the format they're going into for this season. And I like your idea of the North American Cup. That sounds fun.
I literally invented it right now. What a great idea.
I know. It is a good idea. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out this season.
All right. So we have a few other bits of Kansas City Current news. I don't want to shortchange anybody here. We do have a departure. That sounds like she died. She did not die. Kristen Edmonds has left Kansas City. She was a free agent. She's dead to us. She's not dead, but she's dead to us. That's not true. I wish her the best of luck, except for when they play Kansas City. She has joined New Jersey, New York, Gotham. If they just took off the New Jersey, New York, Gotham's such a cool name for a team. It's where she's from. It's a 2-year contract, so she's going home. I can never fault a player for that. She was a Jill of all trades. Is that a way to say it instead of saying a jack of all trades? She was playing all over the field, center back, fullback, midfield. She was a big asset. She'll be missed here in Kansas City. It'll be interesting to see, what players step up to fill that role that Edmonds filled in. In other news, fellow center back Jenna Weinbrenner, she's going into her second year with the Current. She was hired on to the Kansas City Comets staff. Mentioning Thad, he got an interview with Jenna over after the signing was announced. The signing. Do you sign your coaches? I don't know. Words are hard for me right now. So if you go to the youtube.com/The Blue Testament, you can see Thad's interview with Jenna. You get a little one-on-one time with her and talked about, how that's going to play out with her being a coach and the overlap of the season. But any final thoughts from either of you on Edmonds, Weinbrenner, before we wrap it up and move on to our last topic of the night?
Yeah, just one thing on Jenna Weinbrenner becoming a coaching staff for KC Comets. I know for sure she's the first woman coach for KC Comets and maybe even for that entire league, I think I read. So it's pretty remarkable. Yeah. I might have
Eric's nodding in agreement. So you two must be right. I should have read that story.
Yeah. So that's pretty remarkable. And I'm pretty sure she said she was surprised when she found that out. So I was pretty excited about that.
What about you, Eric? What do you think about Edmonds, Weinbrenner?
I read that was one thing got me thinking. I read that was how scheduling works because the arena season overlaps with NWSL. So, and granted, she's not a head coach; she's just joining the coaching staff. So it's probably more flexible appointment. And these are all smart people; they know how to read calendars. They've worked something out. But it's a curiosity as to what that overlap looks like. And also, I was wondering, given how different arena soccer is, it's sort of a hybrid with hockey. It's got very different rules. There are power plays. There's it's an interesting question to how coaching one style of soccer translates. Obviously players go back and forth, but I would love to hear an interview with her after this season on what it's like to try to translate one language into a related language. She's sort of going from Spanish to Italian here in terms of coming from the same group, but there's some very different things going on. How does that work as a coaching transition? I just find that a fascinating question to follow up on, in 6 months when she's had the experience of playing one, coaching the other.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that kind of plays out as well. And then I saw that she's already been kind of participating in practices. She's involved being out on the field. Something kind of interesting about the Comets in general is, and Sheena, I know you don't know this. I'll share it with you and the listeners that aren't familiar. Not like I'm watching the Comets, but maybe this year, maybe this will be my year. Leo Gibson is their head coach. But he's also a player on the team. So he's a coach and a player. The shocked look on your face. Oh, I should screenshot you right now.
Confusion. Like, how does that even work?
Hey, player Chad, that just solves a problem though for Sporting.
We just going to put PV on the field. There's our center back. Yeah,
I think we follow their model and we're done.
I mean, he's definitely in shape to probably be out there and playing.
Oh, the fans would love it.
Oh, that would
hilarious.
Be amazing if it was like in baseball where, how they have to like wear the uniform and then it's like, are we going to put the manager onto the up to bat or out in the field all of a sudden? Well, now, hey, let's put PV in at right center back and then he can, tear himself down in the post-game press conference if he doesn't do a good job.
You think he yells at refs now? Wait till he's on the field.
Yeah, exactly.
He'd be off the field as quickly as he got on the minute they called something he didn't.
You'd have to take away the red card Roger moniker and call it something else.
Yeah, the yellow card for dissent would just be given as soon as PV subbed into the game, probably. One last thing, Sheena put this on our rundown, and I feel like I can't miss it. This past Tuesday was the 2-year anniversary of the Kansas City Current. So I know it's the Current's lineage. It's this weird thing, right? Because they kind of were FC Kansas City for all those years and they won 2 NWSL titles and they went to Utah and became the Utah Royals and they came back here, but it's like they act like those histories are all different. And this is just a 2-year-old team, but is the way I look at it, Kansas City are 2-time NWSL champions and that's what matters. All right. We're going to just do this quick. It's depressing. I don't want to talk too long about it, but the U.S. men's national team, I don't know if you all heard, there's this competition going on in Qatar, the World Cup. I don't know. They do it like once every 4 years for the men, same for the women. The U.S. got eliminated. It's sad, 3-1. Do we need to talk about it? Has it been beaten to absolute death since this past Saturday?
Probably, but I have something to say.
Okay, get your thoughts out there, Sheena. Go.
Overall, I'm really proud of the team. I mean, it's not like we lost to, a bad team. They're the number 8th, I believe, ranked team. So the Netherlands are good. And I just couldn't get over how tall everyone on that team was, especially their goalie. But I think we did have some missed opportunities, especially at the very beginning of the game with Christian Pulisic and that potential goal he could have had. But I have to think he thought he was offsides. And
play till the whistle, right? I thought he was offside too, and then they showed that replay, and he very clearly was not offside. Blend, who scored the second goal for the Netherlands, was keeping him on.
Yeah. And once that third goal was scored, it just felt unlikely that they would be able to score 2 more times, especially because it took, over, I don't even remember at what point they scored the first one, but we were over halfway through the game.
It was very late. And it was a weird one too. It was a weird.
Yeah, it was a weird way to score. But I think the team should feel proud that to get where they did. They were the second youngest team in the World Cup, and hopefully they use this loss as motivation for the 2026 World Cup, which is going to be here in North America and more specifically in Kansas City. So if they're going to win one, it would be cool to win it on your home turf. So I just hope whoever the coach is going forward, they find a striker because we really need one.
I'm just going to throw out 2 things since we're stuck in this anyway. One is that if you told most people ahead of time that we were going to lose to the Netherlands in the knockout round, we'd have taken that. What hurts is the way it happened, and this draws us back to Kansas City because the way it happened felt an awfully lot like watching the last few rough Sporting seasons where the team starts strong, doesn't finish, doesn't take early controls the midfield, plays well, cannot finish to save their lives, eventually gets worn down by an opponent who either reacts and subs better than they do or something else goes wrong. And we have seen Sporting lose games like that so many times where the other team adjusts better. If we'd had that 1-0 lead there for 15 minutes, there's a bunch of Sporting matches would have been won. And it felt, especially since they're playing a similar formation, it just felt very Sporting-like, but on a international stage. And that hurt because I've seen that too many times to see that narrative played out again. We at least have, Agata and Polito. US is going to have to go find the equivalent of that somewhere in this country. You can't just go raid Israel for your new striker.
Yeah, I don't know how do we get Willie Agata?
I'm thinking of Kinda. So... But in the Kansas City sense, it hurt because it's something I've seen too often. The final result, fine. The way we got there felt like it didn't have to be that way.
Yeah, move on. I'll my quick 2 cents on it are overall pretty good performance. They played their worst game in the knockout round. It's a bummer that it happened that way, but they're a super young team. I'm super hyped for 2026. Let's get that World Cup here in Kansas City and, all over the country and North America. And we'll build to it. If you want to hear more about the U.S. men's national team, head on over to our other podcast, Shades of Blue. They did a really good breakdown, talked about Berhalter being the coach again. Should that happen, I recommend for a listen. Okay, I lied. I said there was 1 topic left. I got 1 more topic. We're going to wrap up the show with something that's not Sporting Kansas City related, but MLS related and kind of related to Sporting because it's another team cheating, which is hurting Sporting when other teams are allowed to cheat and get away with it. The LA Galaxy, who we've all long known to be cheaters, were now officially confirmed as cheaters. They were caught cheating on a signing for Christian Pavone. He was listed as a TAM player, targeted allocation money. I'll get more into that concept in the written version of this. But basically, he should have been listed as a designated player. Because of their violation of the rules, the team is paying $1 million fine, which is nothing for AEG. But they lose $1 million in general allocation money, GAM. Teams only get $1.9 million per season. So that is significant. That's money you use to help buy your more expensive contracts down and fit them into the salary budget. Also, as a part of this, Chris Klein, actual Sporting legend, Chris Klein, who is the president of the LA Galaxy, he's been suspended through the end of the 2023 primary transfer window. So that usually runs until sometime in May, give or take. And then Dennis Teclosa, who used to be the general manager for the LA Galaxy, he has to get written permission if he wants to ever get a job in MLS again because of both of their involvements in this cheating scandal. Now, we have all known the Galaxy are cheaters. I wrote about this on the website. Go check it out at the Blue Testament. I would have thought it was on many other signings that they cheated on. Who'd have guessed it was on Pavone? But Eric, I think you had some interesting thoughts about this and more of a broader scale of the MLS roster rules. Weigh in for us.
Yeah, so a quick note on the Athletic article covering this in terms of whether or not this is enough punishment. I'll point out there are a bunch of Galaxy fans on there saying that Klein should have been suspended longer. The team will be better without him. So depending on your perspective, that's something to throw out there. But we've seen a lot of discussion about MLS salary rules are ridiculous or complicated. And I think there's an analogy here to things like the tax code in this country, which is wildly complicated and creates all sorts of pitfalls for well-meaning people and gives you tons of opportunities to cheat. The problem with anything that's too complicated, whether it's a tax code, whether it's bureaucracy, whether it's laws, whether it's financial rules, it creates incentive to cheat and it punishes the people who try to comply. Because if you're an honest person doing your taxes and you have to hire an accountant or you make a mistake and the IRS comes down on you, that's not good for anybody. If you're an MLS team trying to comply and you have to have a whole staff to deal with this nonsense, that is a drain on what sports should be. And it creates a window for something like the Galaxy or Miami to play with things, and it makes a team like Sporting have to work harder than they need to. So to me, the story here is simplify the damn rules. Can I say that?
Yes. And we don't you can say whatever you want.
So it's lots of story about one incident, and the bigger story is stop it with rules that make this a thing people want to have to do.
Yeah, I think that is well said. The rules are incredibly complicated. I'm going to be interested to find out who ratted on the Galaxy, because when Inter Miami were caught cheating, it was because one of their lesser owners, the like minority owners, basically ratted out the majority owners that they had been cheating. And had they not done it, they'd have probably gotten away with it. And they had 5 designated players and you're only allowed 3. So for comparison, this fine was for half as much general allocation money as the Miami fine. Miami's fine was so crippling, they had to trade away quality, really high quality players within the league to acquire more general allocation money to be able to even function. So I think this is something that this podcast will go deeper into in the future, because the roster rules are a mess. They are complicated. And I just want to know more. I can't wait till there's more suspensions coming to the Galaxy when they inevitably announce that they cheated when they signed Zlatan as well, because I'm sure you all are familiar. I know, Sheena, you're really into the international soccer world. After Zlatan left, he bought 50% share in his old Swedish team, Hamburg. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Sorry, Sweden. And it was owned by the same people that owned the Galaxy. So they cut him probably a sweet deal. It's probably shenanigans, but we don't know for now. We'll see in the future if Chris Klein gets like banned for life from Major League Soccer for this next suspension. But we have talked a lot. Hopefully you all enjoyed our 3rd episode of For the Glory KC. I want to thank my wife, Sheena, my lovely wife, and our guest host, Eric, for coming on today. For thebluetestament.com, I am Chad Smith, one of our many editors. Thank you all for listening, and we'll play you out with our theme song, our temporary theme song. We're working on this. Ride It Like You Mean It by Christian Leo. Thanks, everybody.